The ocean is a cruel mistress, taking far more than she gives. For Alicia, a widow, clinging to the wreckage of her life, the storm brought a terror worse than death. The infamous Captain Roderick Ashford. But aboard the Sea Serpent, amidst the roar of cannons and the whisper of dark secrets, she discovers that the most dangerous thing at sea is not the waves, but the heart of a man who has forgotten how to love. In a world where survival is the only law, can a healer mend a pirate's soul before the past destroys them both? The wind did not merely blow. It screamed, a high-pitched wail that tore through the wooden slats of the cottage like paper. Alicia Wren pressed her back against the door, her boots slipping on the floorboards that were already slick with intruding seawater. "Jasper, hold on to me," she shouted over the roar, reaching down to the 7-year-old boy huddled against her skirts. Jasper's eyes were wide, filled with a terror that no child should know. He gripped her hand so tightly his knuckles turned the color of old bone. "The water, Ellie, it's coming in." "I know," she gasped, grabbing a heavy woolen shawl and wrapping it around his small, trembling shoulders. "We have to move. The tide is rising too fast. We need to get to the cliffs." It was a fool's errand, and she knew it. The storm had descended upon the coast with the wrath of a vengeful god. The village below was likely already gone, swallowed by the churning gray maw of the Atlantic. Alicia had stayed too long, trying to pack her herbs, her tinctures, the only things that kept them fed, and now the ocean was knocking at her door. She threw the latch. The wind slammed the door open, nearly knocking her off her feet. Rain lashed at her face like icy whips. "Run, Jasper!" They stumbled out into the maelstrom. The world was a blur of gray and black. The path to the cliffs was a river of mud. Alicia scooped the boy up, his weight heavy in her arms, but adrenaline gave her a strength she didn't possess. She fought her way up the incline, her breath tearing at her throat. A crack, louder than thunder, split the air. She looked up just as the cliff face, undermined by the pounding surf, gave way. The ground beneath her boots dissolved. There was no time to scream, only a sickening lurch of gravity, and then the freezing, crushing embrace of the sea. The water was a chaotic beast. It spun her, slammed her against rocks, and filled her nose with brine. She kicked wildly, her hand frantically searching the dark water. "Jasper!" she choked out as her head broke the surface. A small head bobbed 20 yards away, clinging to a piece of driftwood. "Ellie, hold on!" She struck out towards him, fighting the current that sought to drag her down to the deep. Her limbs grew heavy, the cold seeping into her marrow. She reached him, grabbing the collar of his shirt, pulling him onto the driftwood. "Don't let go," she whispered, her voice failing. A massive wave rose behind them, a wall of death. Alicia closed her eyes, shielding Jasper's body with her own. Captain Roderick Ashford stood at the helm of the Sea Serpent, his boots planted wide against the violent pitch of the deck. Rain ran in rivulets down his leather coat, dripping from the end of his nose. But he did not blink. "She's listing, Captain! We need to turn into the swell!" Callum Hayes, his first mate, roared over the gale. "Hold steady, Iron Hand," Roderick commanded, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the noise. He raised his spyglass, ignoring the spray that coated the lens. "There, in the trough." Callum squinted. Driftwood? Debris? Survivors. In this? Callum shook his head, water flying from his beard. "They're dead men walking, Cap'n. If we turn for them, we risk the mainmast." "I said turn the ship," Roderick snarled, turning to face his mate. His eyes were the color of the storm itself, dark and turbulent. "Bring us alongside. Drop the nets." The Sea Serpent groaned as the wheel turned, the great ship fighting the ocean's fury. Roderick didn't wait. He stripped off his heavy coat, revealing the white linen shirt beneath, instantly soaked transparent against his broad chest. "Captain, you can't." Roderick vaulted over the railing, diving into the freezing hell below. The shock of the cold was a hammer blow, but Roderick had been forged in colder fires. He kicked powerful strokes, his eyes stinging as he scanned the surface. He saw the flash of a pale arm, the dark, sodden mass of a dress. He reached them just as the woman's grip on the wood failed. He grabbed her by the waist, feeling how fragile she was, like a bird with hollow bones. She was unconscious, her head lolling back. The boy was still clinging to the wood, screaming soundlessly. "Got you," Roderick grunted, hooking his arm around the boy and kicking upward. The ascent was agony. The waves battered them against the hull of the ship. A net splashed down beside them. Roderick shoved the boy into the mesh first, shouting for the crew to haul. Then he entangled himself and the woman in the ropes. "Heave!" Callum's voice bellowed from above. They were dragged up the side of the ship, scraping against barnacles and wood, until they tumbled onto the deck. Roderick gasped for air, coughing up seawater, but immediately crawled over to the woman. She was pale, her lips blue. He pressed his ear to her chest, a faint, fluttering rhythm. "Get them below," Roderick ordered, wiping his face. "My cabin, now." Elysia awoke to the smell of burning oil and old wood. The world was still swaying, but the violent thrashing had settled into a rhythmic lulling. She blinked, her vision blurry. She was lying on something soft. Fur? Velvet? She shot up, a gasp of pain catching in her chest. She was in a bed, a large four-poster bed carved from dark mahogany. The room was dim, lit by a swinging lantern. Maps covered the walls, and a heavy desk sat bolted to the floor in the corner. "Jasper," she rasped. The word scraped her throat. "The boy is alive." The voice came from the shadows near the door. Elysia flinched, pulling the thick fur blanket up to her chin. A man stepped into the light. He was tall, filling the space with an overwhelming presence. His black hair was plastered to his skull, drying in messy waves. He wore a loose white shirt, unlaced at the throat, and dark breeches. A jagged scar ran from his jaw down to his collarbone, disappearing beneath the fabric. "Where is he?" Elysia demanded, her fear momentarily eclipsed by panic for the child. "Where am I?" "You are aboard the Sea Serpent," the man said. He didn't smile. His face was a mask of granite. "I am Captain Ashford, and you, little bird, are very lucky to be breathing." "I am not a bird," she snapped, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her head spun. "I want to see Jasper, now." Roderick watched her. She was tiny, shivering, her lips still pale, yet she barked orders at a pirate captain in his own quarters. "The boy is in the galley, being fed," Roderick said, crossing his arms. "He is safe, safer than he was in the water. I need to go to him." Elysia tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Roderick moved with terrifying speed. He was there before she hit the floor, his hands catching her by the arms. His grip was iron, yet strangely careful. "You are weak," he murmured, looking down at her. "You nearly drowned." Elysia looked up into his eyes. They were hard, guarded, but there was a flicker of something else. Curiosity. She pushed against his chest. "Let me go." "I just saved your life," Roderick said, releasing her but not stepping back. "A thank you would suffice." "You are a pirate," she whispered, the realization finally sinking in. The Sea Serpent. The stories of this ship were told in hushed tones in the village tavern. You steal, you kill. And today, I fished a drowning widow out of the Atlantic, he countered dryly. Life is full of contradictions. He turned and walked to his desk, pouring amber liquid into a glass. "Drink this. It will warm your blood." Elysia stared at the glass he offered. "I want my son." "He is not your son," Roderick said, his eyes narrowing. "He called you Ellie, not mother." "He is mine in every way that matters," she said fiercely. "If you have hurt him—" "I do not hurt children," Roderick said, his voice dropping an octave, a dangerous edge creeping in. "Drink the brandy, woman. Then we shall discuss your fate. The brandy burned, but it cleared the fog in her mind. Roderick had retreated to the corner of the room, watching her like a hawk watches a field mouse. "The storm," Elysia said, breaking the silence. "Is it over?" "The worst of it. We are riding the tailwinds now." "You must put us ashore." Roderick laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Ashore? We are 20 leagues from the nearest land, and the sea is still angry. You are going nowhere." "I cannot stay here. You have no choice." Elysia's knuckles whitened on the glass. She looked at the door. "If you won't take me to Jasper, I will find him myself. The crew is restless," Roderick warned. "They are not used to women on board, especially not one who looks like—" He stopped, his gaze sweeping over her. Her dress was ruined, clinging to her frame, torn at the hem. Her hair was a tangled halo of damp curls. "Like what?" she challenged. "Like she would break if handled too roughly," he finished softly. "Stay in the cabin." Elysia set the glass down. "No." She marched to the door. Roderick didn't stop her. He merely watched, a muscle feathering in his jaw. She threw the door open and stepped out into the gangway. The air smelled of unwashed bodies and damp timber. The ship rolled, and she had to grab the wall to steady herself. "Jasper!" she called out. "Well now, what do we have here?" A man stepped out from the shadows of the gun deck. He was missing several teeth, and his eyes roamed over her with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "Lost, darling?" The man took a step closer. Elysia backed up. "I am looking for the boy." "Boy's fine. Maybe I can help you with something else." He reached out, his dirty fingers grazing her arm. "Don't touch me!" Elysia slapped his hand away. The man's face darkened. "Feisty. I like that." He lunged, grabbing her wrist and twisting it behind her back. Elysia cried out, the pain shooting up her shoulder. "Let her go." The command was spoken softly, but it carried the weight of a cannon shot. The crewman froze. He looked up to see Roderick standing in the doorway of the cabin, leaning casually against the frame, his hand resting on the hilt of his cutlass. "Captain," the man stammered, releasing Elysia instantly. "I was just helping the lady." Roderick pushed off the doorframe. He moved slowly, predatorily. He stopped inches from the crewman. "Did she ask for your help, Distinctive?" "No, sir." "Did I give you permission to touch my guest?" "No, sir." Roderick's fist moved so fast Elysia barely saw it. There was a sickening crunch, and the crewman crumpled to the deck, unconscious. Roderick didn't even look down at the fallen man. He looked at Elysia. "I told you to stay in the cabin." Elysia was trembling, rubbing her wrist. He was going to do what men like him do," Roderick said coldly. "Which is why you will listen to me from now on. You are under my protection. That means you belong to me, and no one touches what is mine." The possessiveness in his voice terrified her more than the crewman had. "I belong to no one." "On this ship," Roderick said, stepping closer, looming over her. "You are alive because I say so. That makes you mine until I say otherwise. Now, let's go find the boy." Walmart's Sakali was warm, smelling of porridge and salt pork. Jasper was sitting on a barrel, swinging his legs, a wooden bowl in his lap. He looked small and out of place among the rough-hewn timbers, but he was dry. "Ellie!" He dropped the bowl and scrambled off the barrel, running into her arms. Elysia fell to her knees, burying her face in his neck. "Oh, thank God. Jasper, are you hurt?" "No," he said, pulling back. "Mr. Callum gave me soup. It tastes like old socks, but it's hot." Elysia let out a wet laugh, wiping tears from her cheeks. She looked up to see a burly man with a gray beard, Callum, watching them with a strange expression. "He's a tough lad, ma'am," Callum grunted. "Didn't shed a tear." Elysia stood, keeping a hand on Jasper's shoulder. She looked at Roderick, who was leaning against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Thank you," she said, the words tasting like ash, "for saving him." Roderick's eyes softened, just a fraction, as we looked at the boy. "He reminds me of—" He cut himself off, the mask slamming back into place. "Callum, set up a hammock for the boy in the storage room adjacent to my cabin. He stays there." And the lady? Callum asked. She stays with me. Alicia gasped. I will not. There is nowhere else safe, Roderick said flatly. Unless you wish to sleep in the crew quarters with our friend from the hallway? Alicia swallowed hard. She looked at Jasper. Can he stay with me? No, Roderick said. My cabin is not a nursery. The boy is next door, close enough to hear, far enough to be safe. That is my offer. Take it or swim. Night had fallen, thick and suffocating. The sea serpent creaked and groaned as it cut through the black waves. Inside the captain's cabin, the air was tense. Roderick had locked the door and was sitting at his desk, reviewing charts. Alicia stood by the window, shivering uncontrollably. Her dress was still damp, clinging to her skin like a cold shroud. She wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth chattering. Roderick looked up, his quill pausing. He sighed, a sound of heavy exasperation. He stood and walked to a sea chest at the foot of the bed, rummaging through it. He pulled out a white linen shirt and a pair of thick breeches. Put these on, he said, tossing them onto the bed. You'll catch your death in those rags. Alicia looked at the clothes, then at him. Turn around. Roderick raised an eyebrow. I have seen women before, Alicia, and I pulled you out of the ocean. There is little mystery left. Turn around, she insisted, her voice shaking. He rolled his eyes, but turned his back, facing the wall of maps. Make it quick. Alicia reached for the laces of her bodice. Her fingers were numb, clumsy with cold. She struggled with the wet knots. The fabric was heavy, dragging her down. She managed to loosen the dress, but as she peeled the wet linen from her shoulders, a wave of dizziness hit her. She was so cold. She looked at Roderick's broad back. He was a statue, a predator waiting. She held the dry shirt to her chest, but she couldn't bring herself to take the final step. To be naked in this room with this man? It felt like a surrender she couldn't afford. I can hear your teeth rattling, Roderick said to the wall. Are you dressed? No, she whispered. Then what is the delay? I don't trust you. Roderick turned his head slightly, looking at her over his shoulder. His eyes were dark fire in the gloom. If I wanted to take you, I would have done it when you were unconscious, or when you defied me in the hall. I'm a pirate, yes, but I'm not a monster. Prove it, she said, her voice barely audible. He turned fully then. His gaze dropped to her trembling hands, clutching the shirt against her collarbone. The damp dress sliding off one shoulder. The tension in the room spiked, thick and electric. How? He asked hoarsely. Alicia took a breath, hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She needed the warmth. She needed to survive for Jasper. But she needed to know who this man really was. Will you stay if I undress? The widow asked, her eyes locking with his. Roderick went still. He understood the question. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. She was asking if he had the honor to stand guard over her vulnerability without exploiting it. She was asking if he could be the protector he claimed to be, while standing in the very room where he held all the power. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the defiance beneath the fear. I will stay, Roderick said, his voice rough, and I will not touch. He turned his back to her once more, crossing his arms over his chest, staring fixedly at the map of the coastline where he had lost everything years ago. Change, Alicia, before the cold takes you. Behind him, the rustle of wet fabric hitting the floor sounded like a thunderclap in the silence. Roderick closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists, and did not move. The silence in the cabin was heavier than the storm outside. The only sound was the rustle of wet linen hitting the floorboards and the ragged rhythm of Alicia's breathing. She pulled the oversized shirt over her head, the fabric smelling of cedar and salt, swallowing her small frame. She fumbled with the breeches, cinching them tight with a piece of rope she found on the sea chest. I am dressed, she whispered. Roderick turned slowly. His eyes swept over her, taking in the way his shirt hung off one shoulder. The sleeves rolled up thickly at her wrists. She looked ridiculous, like a child playing dress-up, Yet the sight of her in his clothes stirred something possessive in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. "Better," he grunted, moving to the window to check the horizon. "The damp will kill you faster than a blade out here." "You kept your word," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "I am a pirate, Elysia, not a savage. There is a difference, though the crown fails to see it." He walked to the large mahogany bed and stripped the top quilt off, tossing it onto the floor near the door. "What are you doing?" "You take the bed. I will sleep here." "I cannot take your bed," she protested. "You are the captain, and you are the one who nearly drowned 2 hours ago. Do not argue with me, woman. I have had enough battles for one day." He sat on the floor, leaning his back against the door, his long legs stretched out. He pulled his cutlass from his belt and laid it within easy reach. Elysia hesitated, then climbed onto the mattress. It was vast and warm. She watched him from the shadows of the canopy. "Do you think the man from the hallway, will he come back?" Roderick's eyes were closed, his head tipped back against the wood. "No, but if he does, he will have to step over me to get to you." He opened one eye, fixing her with a piercing stare. "Sleep, Elysia. Tomorrow the real work begins." Morning brought a pale, watery sunlight that revealed the true extent of the damage. The sea serpent had survived the widow's wail, but not without scars. The mainmast was splintered near the top, and the railing on the starboard side was sheared away. Elysia emerged from the cabin, shielding her eyes against the glare. The deck was a hive of activity. Men were splicing ropes, hammering wood, and hauling buckets of water. "Out of the way!" a voice shouted. 2 men rushed past her, carrying a third between them. The injured man was groaning, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood soaking his trousers. "Take him to the surgeon," one of the carriers yelled. "Surgeon's dead," came the reply from Callum, who was barking orders from the quarterdeck. "Swept overboard in the night." The men hesitated, looking at the groaning sailor. "What do we do with him then? Let him rot?" Elysia didn't think. She moved. "Put him down," she ordered, her voice cutting through the din. "There, on the crate." The sailors looked at her, this tiny woman in the captain's oversized shirt, and blinked. "Who are you to give orders?" "I am a healer," she said, stepping forward and kneeling beside the injured man. "And if you don't set this bone now, he will lose the leg. Do you have rum? And clean linen?" Roderick appeared at the top of the stairs, watching. He made a subtle motion with his hand to the crew. "Listen to her." The sailors scrambled. Within moments, Elysia had a bottle of rum and strips of cloth. She looked at the injured man, whose face was gray with shock. "This will hurt," she told him gently, "but it will save you. Drink." She poured the spirit down his throat, then looked at the 2 men standing by. "Hold him down, shoulders and hips. Do not let him move." With practiced hands, she felt the break. It was clean, thank God. She took a breath, gripped the ankle and the calf, and pulled. The bone snapped back into place with a sickening pop. The man screamed and passed out. Elysia didn't flinch. She began binding the leg tightly with the linen. "Keep it elevated. Keep him warm. If it turns black or smells sweet, tell me immediately." She stood up, wiping her hands on her breeches, and found the entire crew staring at her. "Well?" she challenged, lifting her chin. "Does anyone else need tending?" Roderick walked down the stairs, the crew parting for him like the Red Sea. He stopped in front of her, looking at the blood on her hands. "You have a strong stomach for a village healer," he murmured. "Pain is the same everywhere, Captain," she replied, "whether it's in a cottage or on a pirate ship. It demands to be felt." "Aye," Roderick said, a strange respect in his eyes. "That it does." By the 3rd day, the crew had stopped looking at her with hunger and started looking at her with curiosity. She was the widow, the woman who had fixed old Tom's leg and given a salve for the boatswain's rash. But it was Jasper who broke the final barrier. Elysia had been grinding herbs in the galley when she realized the boy was gone. Panic flared, hot and bright. She ran to the deck, scanning the rigging, the rails. She found him at the helm. Roderick was standing behind the great wheel, and Jasper was standing on a crate beside him, his small hands gripping the polished wood. "You see the needle?" Roderick was saying, his voice low and patient. "It always seeks the north. It is the only thing in this world that never lies to you." "Does it know where home is?" Jasper asked, his voice small. Roderick paused. He looked out at the endless blue. "Home is not a place on a map, lad. Home is where you are not being hunted. The compass just tells you how to run." Elysia stopped near the mainmast, watching. She expected Roderick to be harsh, to shoo the child away. Instead, he adjusted Jasper's grip on the wheel. "Hold it steady. Feel the kick of the water against the rudder." "She's alive. You have to listen to her." Jasper beamed, a genuine smile that Elysia hadn't seen since the storm. Roderick looked up and caught Elysia's gaze. For a moment, the mask of the brooding captain slipped, revealing a man who might have once been a father. The look was so raw, so full of hidden pain, that Elysia felt her own heart ache in response. He cleared his throat and stepped back, his face hardening. "Enough lessons. Go to your guardian, boy." Jasper hopped down, running to Elysia. "Ellie, did you see? I steered the ship." "I saw," she said, stroking his hair, but her eyes remained on Roderick as he turned his back to the wind. The peace was shattered 2 days later. "Sail ho!" The cry from the crow's nest sent a jolt of electricity through the ship. Roderick was on the quarterdeck in seconds, spyglass to his eye. Elysia hurried up from the galley, Jasper trailing behind her. "What is it?" Roderick lowered the glass. His face was pale, his lips a thin white lime. "Black sails, the obsidian." He turned to Callum. "Clear the decks, run out the guns, full canvas. I want every inch of speed we have." Is it him?" Elysia asked, stepping closer. Roderick spun on her, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was bruising. "Take the boy. Go to the cabin. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Callum. Do you understand?" "Roderick, who is it?" "Lucian," he spat the name like a curse. "Go!" Now, he shoved her towards the hatch. The urgency in his voice terrified her more than the storm had. This was not nature's fury. This was hatred. She dragged Jasper down the stairs, the sound of running feet and the creaking of gun ports thundering above them. Circles night fell, but the ship did not sleep. They were running silent, no lanterns lit, drifting like a ghost through the fog to lose their pursuer. Elysia couldn't stay in the cabin. The air was too stifling. She cracked the door and saw Roderick sitting on the stairs leading to the deck, a bottle in his hand. He wasn't drinking, just staring at the amber liquid. She stepped out, leaving Jasper asleep in the hammock. She sat on the step above him. "Why does he hunt you?" she asked, softly. Roderick didn't look up. "Because I have something he wants." "Gold?" "No. Satisfaction." He took a swig of the rum. 5 years ago, I was a privateer. I had a commission, a home, a wife. Elysia's breath hitched. "You were married?" "Isabel," he whispered the name. "She was light, pure light, and we had a daughter, Clara." He turned the bottle in his hands. "Lucian was my rival even then, but he didn't want to beat me in battle. He wanted to break me. He found out where I lived. While I was at sea, he paid my village a visit." Elysia covered her mouth with her hand. "I came home to ashes," Roderick said, his voice void of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. "He didn't just kill them, Elysia. He left them for me to find. He wanted me to know that everything I touch turns to dust." He looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears and infinite rage. "That is why you cannot be here. That is why I cannot look at you or the boy. Because Lucian is a shark. He smells attachment. And if he sees that I care for you, you are dead." Elysia reached out, her hand hovering over his shoulder. Then settling gently on the rough wool of his coat. "You are not that man anymore, Roderick. You saved us. You are not death. I am close enough, he whispered, leaning into her touch for just a second before pulling away. Go back inside. If they find us, I need you hidden. The obsidian did not find them, but her hounds did. The next morning, a sleek, fast schooner, a scout ship flying Lucium's colors, burst out of the fog bank on their port side. Fire! Roderick roared. The sea serpent shuddered as her cannons unleashed a broadside. Smoke filled the air, acrid and blinding. Alicia huddled in the cabin with Jasper, covering his ears as the world exploded around them. The scout ship was smaller, but fast. It grappled alongside, hooks tearing into the wood. Men swarmed over the rail. Repel boarders! The clash of steel rang out. Alicia heard bodies hitting the deck. She heard Callum shouting orders, and she heard Roderick's roar, a sound of pure, unleashed fury. A heavy thud against the cabin door made her scream. The wood splintered. A pirate she didn't recognize, one of the attackers, stumbled in, a cutlass in his hand. He saw her and grinned, blood staining his teeth. Well, look at the prize. He stepped forward. Alicia backed up, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick. Suddenly, a blade erupted from the man's chest. He gasped, eyes going wide, and collapsed forward. Roderick stood behind him, breathing hard, his white shirt soaked in red. He yanked his sword free. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, stepping over the body. "No," she shook her head. "Roderick, you're bleeding." He looked down at his side. A deep gash had sliced through his shirt, weeping dark crimson. "It's nothing. We've cleared the deck. Cut the lines," he shouted back through the door. The sea serpent lurched as she broke free from the grappling hooks, leaving the crippled scout ship behind. Roderick swayed, grabbing the doorframe. "Sit down," Alicia ordered, rushing to him. "I need to be on deck." "You need to sit down before you fall down." She guided him to the chair, pushing him into it. She ripped the hem of her underskirt. "Jasper, bring me the water pitcher and the brandy." Roderick hissed as she peeled the blood-soaked shirt away from his skin. The wound was long and jagged, running along his ribs. "This needs stitches," she said, her hands trembling slightly. "Do it," he gritted out. Alicia threaded a needle from her small kit. She cleaned the wound with brandy, causing Roderick to grip the arms of the chair so hard the wood creaked. "Talk to me," he gasped. "Distract me." "You fight like a demon," she said, piercing his skin with the needle. "I learned in the Navy. Before you became a villain?" "I was always a villain, Alicia. I just stopped pretending otherwise." She worked quickly, her face inches from his bare chest. She could feel the heat radiating off him. She tied the final knot and bit the thread. She looked up. His face was close. Too close. His eyes were dark, dilated with pain and adrenaline. He was looking at her mouth. The air between them crackled. The smell of blood and gunpowder faded, replaced by the scent of him, musk and rain. Roderick raised a hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, smearing a drop of blood there. "You should fear me," he whispered. "I don't," she breathed. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. Alicia's eyes fluttered shut. "Captain!" Callum's voice boomed from the deck. "Land ho! The islands!" Roderick pulled back as if burned. He stood up, wincing, the mask slamming back into place. "Good," he said roughly. "We need repairs." He walked out without looking back, leaving Alicia breathless and trembling in the chair. The storm-lashed islands lived up to their name. Jagged peaks of black rock rose from the churning sea, surrounded by a maze of reefs that only a master pilot could navigate. Roderick guided the sea serpent into a hidden cove, a slice of calm turquoise water protected by high cliffs. They dropped anchor. The silence was jarring after days of wind and battle. "We go ashore," Roderick announced. "We need fresh water and timber to fix the mast." The longboat took them to the sandy beach. Alicia stepped out, her boots sinking into the white sand. The ground felt strange beneath her feet, steady, unmoving. Jasper ran ahead, chasing crabs along the shoreline. Roderick stood beside her, watching the tree line. "You could run," he said quietly. "There are settlements on the other side of the island. Smugglers, mostly, but they might take you in." Elysia looked at the dense jungle, then back at the ship, and finally at him. He looked tired. The bandage she had applied was stark white against his skin beneath his open coat. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "To be rid of me?" Roderick looked at her. "I want you to be safe. And I am not safe. Safety is a cage, Roderick. I lived in a cage for years, afraid of the sea, afraid of the world. You pulled me out." She stepped closer to him. "I am not running." Roderick stared at her, a mixture of relief and terror in his eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his large, rough one. "Then God help you, Elysia," he murmured, "because Lucian is coming, and he will burn the world to get to us." As the sun set over the cove, casting long shadows across the sand, the peace felt fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. And somewhere beyond the reef, the black sails of the Obsidian were catching the wind. The attack did not come from the sea, where Roderick's eyes were fixed. It came from the jungle. One moment, the cove was filled with the sounds of saws cutting timber and the gentle lap of waves. The next, a flock of tropical birds erupted from the canopy in a screeching cloud of color. "Down!" Roderick roared, tackling Elysia into the sand just as the crack of musket fire shattered the peace. Sand kicked up around them as lead balls whistled through the air. Screams erupted from the crew near the tree line. "To the boats!" Callum bellowed, drawing his pistol and firing blindly into the green wall of foliage. "Move, you dogs! Move!" Roderick scrambled up, dragging Elysia with him. "Where is the boy?" "Jasper!" Elysia screamed, scanning the beach. The boy was near the rock pools, frozen in terror, clutching a shell. A man emerged from the ferns, a brute in a red bandana raising a cutlass. Roderick didn't hesitate. He drew the knife from his belt and threw it in one fluid motion. The blade took the attacker in the throat. The man dropped. Roderick sprinted across the sand, scooping Jasper up with one arm while shoving Elysia towards the water with the other. "Go! Get to the longboat!" The beach descended into chaos. Lucian's men poured out of the jungle like ants, shouting war cries. The Sea Serpent's crew, caught off guard, fought with desperate ferocity. They reached the surf. Callum and 3 others were already pushing the heavy longboat into the waves. Roderick threw Jasper into the boat and turned back, drawing his cutlass. "Get in," Elysia cried, grabbing his sleeve. "I have to cover them." Roderick shouted, shoving her towards the gunwale. "Go!" He turned to face the oncoming wave of pirates. He was a blur of steel and rage, parrying blows, kicking men back into the sand. He bought them seconds, precious, bloody seconds. "Row!" Callum commanded. As the boat lurched forward, Roderick waded backward into the surf, cutting down a man who tried to grab the stern. He hauled himself over the side, water streaming from his clothes, his chest heaving. "Pull!" Musket balls splashed the water around them as they rowed frantically toward the Sea Serpent. They scrambled up the nets onto the deck of the ship. "Weigh anchor!" Roderick shouted the moment his boots hit the wood. "Cut the cable if you have to. Get us out of this cove." "Captain!" The lookout screamed. "Look to the mouth!" The Obsidian had arrived. The massive black ship, larger and heavily gunned, was rounding the headland, blocking the exit. "Hard to starboard," Roderick ordered, his mind racing. "Take us through the Needle's Eye." "The reefs?" Callum paled. "That's suicide." "It's that or death by grapeshot. Turn the wheel." The Sea Serpent heeled violently as she turned away from the open water and toward the jagged line of rocks that foamed with white water. The Obsidian fired her bow chasers, 2 distinct booms, but the shots fell short, splashing in their wake. Roderick took the helm himself. He could feel the vibration of the water against the rudder. He threaded the ship through a gap in the rocks so narrow that the spray from the breaking waves soaked the deck. A terrible scraping sound echoed through the hull, wood grinding on stone. But they pushed through, emerging into the open ocean on the other side of the reef. The Obsidian, too deep-drafted to follow, was forced to tack around the entire island. They had escaped. but only just. The sun had set, leaving the sky a bruised purple. The sea serpent limped westward, the crew silent and grim. They had lost 3 men on the beach. In the captain's cabin, the air was toxic with tension. Roderick paced the small space like a caged tiger. He slammed his fist against the bulkhead, making the lantern swing. How did he know? He growled. That cove was a secret known only to 3 men, and 2 of them are dead. Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, holding a sleeping Jasper. She looked up at him. Roderick, calm down. You're frightening the boy. I should be frightening him. Roderick spun on her. We were careless. I was careless. I let my guard down because of... He gestured vaguely at her, at the domestic scene. Because of this. Because you were happy for an hour? Elijah stood up, carefully laying Jasper down. She walked to him. Because I was distracted, Roderick shouted. And now 3 of my men are dead. Lucien is right behind us, and I cannot protect you. He grabbed her arm, dragging her towards the door. Where are we going? She demanded, trying to pull away. The brig. Alicia dug her heels in. What? The brig, he repeated, his eyes wild. It's below the waterline. Reinforced oak. If they fire on us, if they board us, it is the safest place. I am not going into a cell. You will go where I tell you. He opened the door and pulled her into the gangway. No! Alicia twisted, using a move she had seen the crew use, stomping hard on his instep. Roderick grunted and loosened his grip. Alicia shoved him back. I am not your prisoner, Roderick, and I am not Isabel. The name hung in the air like smoke. Roderick froze. The fury drained from his face, replaced by a stark, hollow agony. Do not speak her name, he whispered. I will speak it, Elysia said, her voice trembling but firm. Because you are trying to bury me just like you buried her. You think if you lock me away in the dark, nothing can touch me. But I am alive. I am here, and I can help you. Help me? Roderick gave a bitter laugh. How? Can you fire a cannon? Can you navigate a storm? You are a healer, Elysia. You fix broken things. But we are about to be destroyed. Then let me face it standing next to you, she pleaded. Do not put me in a cage. If we die, I want to die looking at the sky, not a stone wall. Roderick stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had made her ask him to stay while she undressed. He realized with a jolt that she was stronger than he was. He was driven by fear of loss. She was driven by the will to live. He slumped against the wall, covering his face with his hands. I cannot lose you. I cannot survive it again. Elysia stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face to his chest. He stood rigid for a moment, then crumbled, wrapping his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. He shook with silent tremors. You won't lose me, she promised, but we have to fight together. The reprieve lasted until dawn. The wind died. The sails hung limp and useless. The sea serpent drifted on a glassy sea, a sitting duck, and on the horizon, the black sails of the obsidian grew larger. She had caught the last of the night breeze and was closing in, her oars out, rowing relentlessly toward them. They have the weather gauge, Callum said quietly, standing beside Roderick at the rail. We can't run. Then we fight, Roderick said, buckling his sword belt. Captain, Callum hesitated. Look. A white flag ran up the mast of the obsidian. A parley? Roderick narrowed his eyes. Lucien doesn't parley. The enemy ship drew closer, stopping a cable's length away. A man stood on the quarterdeck of the black ship, dressed in fine red velvet that clashed with the gray sea. He held a speaking trumpet. Roderick. The voice drifted across the water, smooth and mocking. It has been a long time, old friend. Roderick stood on the rail, holding on to the rigging. Not long enough, Lucien. What do you want? I want what you stole from me, Lucien shouted. My reputation, my pride. But I am a reasonable man. I see you're becalmed. I see your ship is damaged. You cannot win this. Come and try. I have a better offer. Lucien gestured to his crew. The gun ports of the obsidian opened, revealing a terrifying row of cannons pointed directly at the sea serpent. Give me the woman, Lucien called out, and the boy. Hand them over, and I will let your crew live. I will let you sail away. I only want the prize. A murmur ran through the crew of the sea serpent. Men looked at each other. They looked at the cannons. Then, slowly, eyes began to turn toward Elysia, who stood near the helm, clutching Jasper's hand. Silence! Callum roared, sensing the shift in the wind. Lucien laughed. Think about it, Roderick. Their lives for hers? Is one woman worth the blood of 50 faithful men? Is she worth your ship? Roderick felt the weight of every gaze on him. He looked at his crew, men he had sailed with for years, men who had families, dreams. Then he looked at Elysia. She was pale, her eyes wide, but she didn't look away. She stood tall. She is not cargo to be traded. Roderick shouted back, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. If you want her, you will have to burn this ship to the waterline and sift her from the ashes. Lucien lowered the trumpet. Even at this distance, Roderick could feel the smile vanish. So be it, Lucien's voice came, fainter now, carried by the wind. No quarter. The white flag came down. The red flag, the bloody jack, went up. Roderick jumped down to the deck. Stations, he roared. Prepare to repel boarders. If we die today, we die like men. The crew hesitated for a fraction of a second, the temptation of life hanging in the air. Then, Callum drew his sword and let out a war cry. The spell broke. The men rushed to their posts. Roderick turned to Elysia. He grabbed her face in his hands, kissing her fiercely, a kiss of desperation and promise. Get below, he said against her lips. Hide. And pray. I love you, she whispered. Roderick froze. It was the first time she had said it. I know, he said, a tragic smile touching his lips. That's why I have to win. He pushed her toward the hatch as the first cannon roared from the obsidian, sending a ball screaming through the rigging above their heads. The battle had begun. The deck of the Sea Serpent was a slaughterhouse. Smoke choked the air, thick and acrid, stinging the eyes and burning the throat. The clash of steel was deafening, a chaotic symphony of screams and grinding metal. Roderick fought like a man possessed. His cutlass was a blur, parrying, slashing, driving back the wave of boarders that poured over the rails. But for every man he cut down, 2 more took his place. The Obsidian's crew was fresh, and they were many. Back, Roderick roared, shoving a pirate over the rail with his boot. Form a line at the helm. Protect the hatch. He glanced wildly toward the cabin where he had ordered Elysia to hide. The door was splintered. Roderick! The scream tore through the din. He spun around. Lucien stood on the quarterdeck, his velvet coat pristine amidst the gore. He had Elysia by the hair, a dagger pressed to her white throat. Beside them, 2 of his men held Callum on his knees, a pistol pressed to the first mate's temple. Drop it, Roderick. Lucien's voice cut through the noise like a whip. Drop the sword, or your loyal dog dies, and then the woman bleeds. Roderick froze. His chest heaved, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. The crew of the Sea Serpent, battered and outnumbered, looked to their captain. Don't do it, Captain, Callum shouted, spitting blood. Let him shoot. Silence. Lucien pressed the dagger harder against Elysia's skin. A thin bead of crimson welled up. Roderick's sword clattered to the deck. Good, Lucien smiled. Bind him. Men swarmed Roderick, kicking his legs out from under him, tying his hands with rough rope. They dragged him to the base of the stairs, forcing him to his knees so he had to look up at Lucien and Elysia. A fair trade, I think, Lucien mused, stroking Elysia's cheek with his free hand. She flinched, her eyes locked on Roderick, filled with terror and tears. I take the prize. You keep your miserable lives, for now. Let her go, Lucien, Roderick rasped, straining against the ropes. This is between us. It was, Lucian agreed, but now it is about what I deserve. He shoved Elysia toward his men. Take her to the obsidian. No, Roderick lunged, but a rifle butt slammed into his kidney, driving him back down. Roderick, Elysia cried out, fighting the hands that grabbed her. She looked back at him, her face a mask of tragedy. Live. Promise me you will live. Look after Jasper. Elysia. They dragged her to the rail and threw her roughly onto the boarding plank. Lucien followed, pausing to look down at Roderick one last time. She reminds me of Isabel, Lucien said softly. I wonder if she screams as prettily. Roderick roared, a sound of pure animalistic agony, thrashing against his bonds until his wrists bled. But it was too late. The obsidian cast off the grappling hooks. The black ship drifted away, taking the light of his world with it. Night settled over the ocean, heavy and silent. The sea serpent drifted, a broken thing. The mainmast was cracked, the sails tattered. Roderick sat on the quarterdeck, his hands unbound now, staring into the darkness where the obsidian stern lights had vanished hours ago. He had not moved. He had not spoken. The grief was a physical weight, crushing his lungs. He had failed. Again. Captain. Roderick didn't blink. Small footsteps approached. Jasper stood beside him. The boy held something in his hands, the brass compass. It's broken, Roderick whispered, his voice dead. No, Jasper said firmly. He held it up. The needle trembled, pointing steadily northeast. You said it never lies. You said it finds the way. Roderick looked at the compass, then at the boy. Jasper's eyes were red from crying, but his chin was set in a stubborn line that mirrored Roderick's own. She is gone, lad. She is not gone, Jasper insisted. She is just over there, and you are the captain. You have to go get her. Roderick closed his eyes. You have to go get her. He felt a spark in the ashes of his soul. It wasn't hope, it was something hotter. It was the refusal to accept the ending Lucien had written. Roderick stood up. He swayed, then steadied himself. He looked at Callum, who was nursing a bandaged head nearby. Callum, aye, Captain. How much sail can we raise? The foremast is sound. We can rig a jury sail on the main stump. But we can't catch them, sir. They have the speed. We don't need speed, Roderick said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy calm. We have the wind, and we have the dark. Douse every lantern. Wet the canvas so it doesn't reflect the moon. We are not going to chase them, Callum. We are going to hunt them. Elysia sat on the velvet settee in Lucian's cabin, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The room was opulent, filled with stolen treasures, smelling of lavender and rot. The door opened. Lucian entered, carrying 2 goblets of wine. You are too tense, my dear, he purred, closing the door and locking it. We have a long voyage ahead. You should relax. He held out a goblet. Elysia took it, her mind racing. She had checked the windows, too small. The door, locked. Her only weapon was time. Where are you taking me? She asked, keeping her voice steady. To a place where Roderick's ghost cannot follow. Lucian smiled, sitting beside her. He reached for her hair. Elysia stood up abruptly, walking to the other side of the table. You speak of him often. For a man who claims to have won, you seem haunted by him. Lucian's smile faltered. I am haunted by nothing. You killed his wife, Elysia said, turning to face him, because you were jealous, and now you take me. Do you never tire of living in his shadow? Lucian's face twisted. He slammed the goblet down, wine spilling like blood across the table. I am no one's shadow. I am the king of this sea. He rounded the table, grabbing her arm. And you will learn to show respect. Elysia braced herself, grabbing a heavy stone bust from the shelf behind her. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the deck above. Then a gunshot. Then the unmistakable sound of steel on steel. Lucian froze. What in the hells? The cabin window behind them shattered inward. Roderick swung through the opening on a rope, crashing into the room in a shower of glass and wood. He rolled to his feet, cutlass in hand. He looked like a demon rising from the pit, clothes torn, blood-stained, eyes burning with cold fire. "Roderick!" Elysia gasped, dropping the stone. "Get behind me!" he ordered. Lucian drew his sword, a sneer twisting his lips. "You persistent rat! I should have cut your throat when I had the chance." "You should have," Roderick agreed, stepping forward, "because now I'm going to cut out your heart." They clashed. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Sparks flew as blades met. Lucian was fast, a master fencer, but Roderick fought with the brute strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. Lucian lunged, his blade grazing Roderick's ribs. Roderick didn't even flinch. He countered, a heavy overhand blow that forced Lucian back against the desk. "You failed, Isabel!" Lucian taunted, parrying desperately. "You couldn't save her. You can't save this one!" Roderick roared, driving Lucian back toward the shattered window. But Lucian was cunning. He grabbed a heavy candelabra and swung it, striking Roderick in the temple. Roderick stumbled, vision swimming. He fell to one knee. Lucian raised his sword for the killing stroke. "Goodbye, Captain." "No." Elysia grabbed a discarded pistol from the desk, Lucian's own weapon, and swung it with both hands. The heavy brass butt connected with the back of Lucian's head with a sickening crack. Lucian staggered forward, stunned. It was all the opening Roderick needed. He surged up, driving his cutlass forward. Lucian gasped, looking down at the steel protruding from his chest. He looked at Roderick, then at Elysia. The light faded from his eyes. He crumpled to the floor. Silence filled the room, broken only by the ragged breathing of the two survivors. Roderick dropped his sword. He stepped over the body and pulled Elysia into his arms. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe, burying his face in her neck. "I thought I lost you," he choked out, his body shaking. "You would come," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The compass, Roderick. You always find the way." The water, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. The obsidian had been taken, her crew surrendering once their leader fell. Roderick stood at the helm of the Sea Serpent, bandaged and weary, but standing tall. Elysia stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm. Jasper sat at their feet, polishing the brass compass. "What now?" Elysia asked, looking out at the endless horizon. Roderick looked at the map spread out before him. He traced a line to a small, unmarked cove far to the south, a place of safety, away from the shipping lanes, away from the blood and the gunpowder. "We go home," he said. "To the village?" "No," Roderick turned to her, cupping her face in his hand. He looked at the scar on his arm, then at the peace in her eyes. "To the hidden cove. We build something new. No more running, no more revenge." He looked down at Jasper. "What do you say, quartermaster? Shall we set a course for paradise?" Jasper jumped up. "Aye, Captain." Roderick smiled, a true smile, one that reached his eyes and banished the shadows that had lived there for so long. He pulled Elysia close, kissing her forehead as the wind filled the sails, pushing them toward a future that was finally their own. Love had been the storm that wrecked them, and the anchor that saved them. They sailed into the light, free at last.